The morning I jokingly told my neighbor, "Come with me," I expected her to roll her eyes, shut her front door, and return to the quiet life she guarded so fiercely. Instead, Claire Whitmore looked at the small travel bag in my hand, then stared at me with tears already gathering in her eyes and whispered, "I've been waiting for someone to ask me that for 3 years." In that instant, the smile disappeared from my face, because I understood that my harmless joke had reached a place inside her that had been hurting in silence. Before I tell you what happened next, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, because sometimes one careless sentence can become the lifeline someone has been praying for. My name is Grant Holloway, and until that bright Saturday morning, Claire had been nothing more than the quiet woman who lived in the pale blue house beside mine. She was 34, always dressed neatly, always polite, and almost never outside longer than necessary. Every weekday at exactly 7:45, she walked to her silver sedan carrying a leather handbag and a stainless steel coffee cup. Every afternoon at 5:20, she returned, collected her mail, and disappeared behind drawn curtains. She worked remotely for an insurance company most days, yet she maintained her routine as though structure itself kept her upright. During the 18 months I had lived beside her, our conversations rarely went beyond weather, recycling schedules, or complaints about the stubborn hedge separating our driveways. I knew she had once been married because an older neighbor mentioned it, but no husband ever appeared, and Claire never spoke about him. There was a sadness in her that did not announce itself dramatically. It lived in the way she watched families loading groceries into their cars, in the way she paused when children laughed on the sidewalk, and in the way she smiled as though every expression of happiness had to pass through grief first. That Saturday, I was driving 2 hours north to help my younger sister, Meredith, move into a new apartment after leaving a difficult relationship. I had packed tools, bottled water, and enough sandwiches for a small construction crew. Claire stepped onto her porch while I was securing a box in the back of my truck. She wore jeans, a cream sweater, and the tired expression of someone who had not slept well. I lifted my travel bag and called across the hedge that she should come with me because Meredith always needed extra hands and paid her helpers in pizza. It was an unserious invitation, the kind neighbors make when they expect an equally unserious refusal. But Claire's answer changed the air between us. When she said she had been waiting for someone to ask, her voice carried such raw desperation that I set the bag down. I asked whether she was all right, and she quickly wiped her face, embarrassed by her own honesty. She said she did not know. Then she looked back at her silent house and admitted that if she remained inside another entire day, she feared she might lose whatever part of herself still wanted to keep going. That I did not demand an explanation. I simply told her Meredith could use another pair of hands and that we would be back before sunset. Claire hesitated, then went inside and returned 10 minutes later with a small canvas purse and her hair tied back. As she locked her door, her fingers trembled so badly that she dropped the keys twice. During the first 30 minutes of the drive, she sat rigidly beside me, watching sunlit fields pass beyond the window. I filled the silence with harmless stories about Meredith's talent for choosing apartments on the 3rd floor of buildings without elevators. Slowly, Claire's shoulders loosened. She even laughed when I told her my sister once tried to move a sofa through a window because she refused to admit it was too large for the stairwell. The laugh surprised Claire as much as it surprised me. She covered her mouth, and for a moment, guilt crossed her face, as though happiness were something she no longer had permission to feel. Meredith greeted us outside her apartment building beneath a clear blue sky. She was 29, stubborn, warm-hearted, and still bruised emotionally from the relationship she had finally escaped. When I introduced Claire as my neighbor and unexpected rescue crew, Meredith did not question why a stranger had joined us. She hugged her as though they were old friends and immediately handed her a roll of packing tape. That simple welcome seemed to unsettle Claire. Her eyes filled again, but she turned away and began carrying cushions upstairs. For the next 3 hours, we worked beneath the bright afternoon sun, hauling boxes, assembling shelves, and arguing playfully over where Meredith's enormous collection of houseplants should go. Claire proved more capable than either of us. She organized the kitchen, repaired a loose drawer with one of my screwdrivers, and transformed a chaotic stack of boxes into orderly rows. With every completed task, a little more color returned to her face. During lunch, we sat on the apartment building's shared courtyard beneath a broad maple tree. Meredith spoke openly about leaving her former boyfriend after years of being criticized, controlled, and convinced she could not survive alone. Claire listened with painful concentration. When Meredith said the hardest part had not been leaving but believing she deserved a life afterward, Claire lowered her sandwich and stared at the ground. She finally admitted that her husband, Preston, had died 3 years earlier in a highway accident on a rainy morning. They had argued before he left the house. Claire had told him she was tired of carrying their marriage alone and that maybe he should not come back until he decided whether he truly wanted to be there. He drove away angry, and less than an hour later, a police officer appeared at her workplace. Since that day, Claire had believed her final words had sent him to his death. Meredith reached across the table and held her hand. I remained silent, because nothing I could say would erase 3 years of guilt. Claire explained that everyone had told her the accident was caused by another driver losing control, but facts had never quieted the voice inside her. She replayed the argument each morning, imagining different words, different choices, and a different ending. She had stopped visiting friends because their sympathy exhausted her. She had declined family gatherings because her parents watched her too carefully. She had sold most of Preston's belongings but kept his home office untouched, exactly as he had left it. Her house was not really a home anymore. It was a museum built around the worst moment of her life. The moving day became something deeper than any of us expected. Meredith told Claire that guilt often disguises itself as loyalty. She said sometimes people punish themselves because healing feels like betrayal. Claire began crying openly, not the quiet tears she had hidden on her porch, but deep, shaking sobs that seemed to come from years of loneliness. No one told her to stop. No one rushed her. We stayed beneath that tree while sunlight moved across the courtyard, and strangers carried groceries past us without knowing a life was beginning to change only a few feet away. When Claire finally regained her breath, she confessed that the date of Preston's death was the following week. She had planned to spend it alone in his office, reading old messages and blaming herself until the day ended. Meredith looked at her with a firmness I recognized from childhood and said Claire should not spend another anniversary inside that room. She suggested doing something Preston had loved instead. Claire said he had volunteered at a community garden every spring, teaching children how to plant vegetables. After his death, she had stopped going because the garden held too many memories. Meredith asked whether avoiding everything he loved had truly honored him. Claire had no answer. The question remained with us while we finished unpacking. On the drive home that afternoon, Claire seemed lighter but frightened, like someone standing at the edge of a bridge she knew she needed to cross. She thanked me for inviting her, and I admitted that the invitation had been a joke. She surprised me by smiling. She said perhaps life had a strange way of using foolish words for serious purposes. When we reached our street, the sun still hung high above the rooftops. Claire did not immediately leave the truck. She asked whether I would come inside her house for a few minutes because there was something she could not face alone. Her home was immaculate but lifeless. No photographs stood in the living room, no flowers brightened the windows, and the air carried the stillness of a place rarely shared. At the end of the hallway, Claire stopped before a closed door. Her hand rested on the knob, yet she could not turn it. She said Preston's office had remained untouched since the morning he died. Even the coffee cup on his desk was still there, washed but returned to the exact spot where he had left it. I asked what she wanted to do. She said she wanted to open the door without feeling that she was opening the accident all over again. Together, we entered. Sunlight streamed through dusty blinds and fell across shelves of gardening books, framed certificates, and old photographs. On the desk stood a picture of Claire and Preston laughing beside a wheelbarrow full of tomatoes. She looked younger, but more than that, she looked free. Claire picked up the photograph and pressed it against her chest. Then she noticed a small wooden box behind a stack of notebooks. Inside were letters Preston had written during the first year of their marriage, along with a sealed envelope bearing her name. Claire stared at it in disbelief. The envelope had been placed there before his death, but she had never opened the box. Her hands shook as she unfolded the letter. Preston had written it several weeks before the accident after one of their earlier arguments. The message was not a farewell. It was an apology. He admitted that work had made him distant, that he had taken Claire's patience for granted, and that he feared he was becoming the kind of husband who expected love without nurturing it. He wrote that if he ever seemed unwilling to return emotionally, she should remind him that home was not simply a building but the person he had promised to choose every day. Near the end, he said that no argument could erase what she meant to him and that anger was only a passing storm, never the full truth of their marriage. Claire sank into the desk chair and wept. For years, she had treated their final argument as the final definition of their love. Yet Preston's letter proved that he had understood their struggles long before that morning. Her words had not created the distance between them, and they had not caused the accident. They had been the desperate truth of a woman asking her husband to return to the marriage they were both losing. Claire read the letter again, more slowly. Then she said she had spent 3 years remembering only the last hour of Preston's life while forgetting the thousands of hours in which they had loved, failed, forgiven, and chosen each other again. The following week, on the anniversary of Preston's death, Claire did not sit alone in his office. At 9 in the morning, she knocked on my door wearing gardening gloves and holding a box of vegetable seeds. Meredith had driven down to join us. Together, we went to the community garden where Preston had once volunteered. Claire's first steps through the gate were hesitant. Every raised bed carried a memory. An elderly coordinator named Ruth recognized her and embraced her without asking where she had been. She told Claire that Preston had once said the best thing about planting was trusting that buried things could still rise toward the light. Claire spent the day helping children plant tomatoes, peppers, and sunflowers. At first, her voice broke whenever someone mentioned Preston, but as the morning continued, she began telling stories about him that ended in laughter rather than tears. She described how he once planted an entire row of seeds backward on the instruction chart and blamed the wind. She showed a little boy how to press soil gently around a seedling, explaining that roots needed support but also room to grow. While I watched her, I realized she was speaking about herself without knowing it. That afternoon, Claire made a decision that frightened her but also freed her. She donated Preston's gardening books and tools to the community program. She kept the photograph, the letter, and several personal items that carried love rather than punishment. Over the next month, she cleared the office and turned it into a bright reading room. She opened the curtains throughout the house. She began visiting her parents again and accepted invitations she once avoided. Healing did not happen in a straight line. Some mornings she still woke with guilt pressing against her chest. Some afternoons she stood in the hallway and missed Preston so deeply that she could barely breathe. But she no longer treated those moments as proof that she had failed. She allowed grief to visit without letting it become the owner of her life. My friendship with Claire also changed. What began as a neighborly accident became a steady companionship. We drank coffee on our porches, volunteered at the garden, and helped Meredith rebuild her confidence after her breakup. Claire learned that she could speak about Preston without making others uncomfortable. I learned that people who appear composed may be carrying battles too heavy to name. Neither of us rushed to define what our bond might become. It was enough that she no longer felt invisible and that I no longer mistook silence for peace. Nearly a year later, on another bright Saturday morning, I loaded my truck for a trip to the community garden spring festival. Claire stepped onto her porch wearing the same cream sweater she had worn the day everything changed. She carried a basket of seedlings and smiled with a warmth that seemed to fill the entire street. I lifted my keys and jokingly told her, once again, to come with me. This time, she laughed before answering. She said she would, but only because someone had finally taught her that leaving the house did not mean leaving Preston behind. It meant carrying the best of him forward. Before the festival ended that afternoon, Claire planted a young maple tree near the garden entrance in Preston's memory. A small plaque beneath it did not mention the accident or the argument. It simply honored a man who believed buried things could rise toward the light. Claire stood beside the tree with Meredith and me, her eyes wet but peaceful. She said forgiveness had not required forgetting Preston or pretending their marriage had been perfect. It required releasing herself from the belief that one painful moment was stronger than an entire lifetime of love. Please leave a meaningful comment about someone who helped you step back into life when you felt lost, or share what forgiveness means to you. Your words may reach someone who is silently waiting for a reason to open their door. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. As the afternoon sun shone through the maple's new leaves, Claire pressed a hand gently against its slender trunk. 3 years earlier, she had believed her life had ended with one terrible goodbye. Now she understood that love was not measured only by the words spoken before tragedy. It was also measured by everything that came before, everything that remained afterward, and every brave step taken toward tomorrow. My invitation had begun as a joke, but her answer had become a promise. She had come with me that morning, and somewhere along the way, she had finally returned to herself.